welcome
Hello.
to the fourth Indaba. I'm
Hello.
Heather, and this is Marco and Monica and Britt, and we also have Reese in the background. I hear myself. I think one of you, maybe Britt. Can you just? Yeah, I totally hear it. I hear myself on your end for some weird reason. I
No,
know, right?
it worked fine in testing, and then we launched it to production.
When are we gonna have pipe wire?
That's a subject for another
Right.
Indaba.
It wasn't terrible, Britt. Like either way. Anyways, yeah. So I'm Heather. I have been here for the last few ones, and I'm so happy to have you all here. So please submit your questions in the YouTube chat or the Twitch chat, and we'll be collecting those and answering them in a little bit. So I wanted to start off things a little bit and say, like, we just had Guadec last week. That was really cool. So Ubuntu and GNOME continue to do like a lot of great things. Like we have GNOME 40 out in Impish that I want to encourage everybody to go and download, and we'll provide a link to that a little bit later. But yeah, so GNOME 40 is very exciting, and I'm personally super excited about it because I just upgraded my Ubuntu laptop, so now I'm using GNOME 40 actually for the first like real time. I mean, I've tested a little bit here and there. Anyways, not the point. But it was really deja vu feeling for when GNOME 3 came out, which was like back in 2011. I remember I was a Debian user at that time, and GNOME 3 was very different. And once again, GNOME 40 is very different, but very exciting. And there are some little things to get used to and change, but there's lots of room for contribution and testing and bug reports and all the cool things. So anyways, speaking of GNOME 40, we have Marco here, who has been very instrumental in making GNOME 40 happen on Ubuntu. So please, it's give us all of your GNOME 40 questions for Marco. And here, I'd like to show a little bit of some of what the features look like. If we can just put that presentation in the foreground somehow. Oh, there we go. Yeah, Marco, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, so hello, I'm Marco. I work at Canonical, mostly on GNOME stuff. Also, I'm GNOME developer, like I work in upstream. And this is mostly the downstream work that we did in Ubuntu in order to get GNOME 40 into Impish. It took like half a cycle more than usual because the relevant changes which has been done upstream, with some of them we also joined efforts for, which basically made us to reinvent a bit a few things, and most of all the dock, which is based on dash-to-dock, but which was completely changing in the upstream code. As you know, GNOME 40 is now using a dock, dash as it's called, in the bottom, which is showing all the favorites, and shown only when you open the overview as it was before, but it's not like on the left side as used to be, which might be look a simple change. Well, when it comes to extensions, which are mostly at the end, monkey patching of the JavaScript code of the shell, it might imply lots of changes needed in order to get the same experience. So we wanted to preserve our usual look by showing the dock on the left side, and this is my, it took a while in order to get everything properly done. I have to say that most of the upstream work for the initial work for getting the dock usable in GNOME 40 was being done by a community guy of the upstream project of the GNOME Shell dock, Evan Walsh, which is also a follow developer for GJS and other GNOME stuff. So basically, he started the work, and we continued on that in order to make it work properly for the panel mode as we use. So, and in order to adapt, for example, the new APIs for the device support and stuff like that. There are various things which are still, in progress, but of course we're catching up, and we will continue getting improved.
What
So yeah,
was
this
the
is mostly
hardest thing to like? What was the biggest challenge to kind of integrating it with Ubuntu?
yeah. Also, another part which is, in order to get 14 Ubuntu, was that Debian is frozen, which implies that the work in getting the new pack was frozen. I think it's now about to release, but so it implies that in order to get all the changes to Ubuntu, it meant to do all the work to get the packaging in Debian first, and then to base in Ubuntu. And we've been basically alone as Ubuntu developers in doing this. And we also always try to do the work in Debian first, because of course it makes everything happier and better. So all this work has been, quite a lot, because GNOME is now made of many packages, and many things change. Also, the silly thingy of changing the versioning schema from using 3 dot something, it would have been 14 this time, but dot something else, to using a integer number and then something else. It might implies, adapting the tooling for all the versioning, handling the distribution. So there are many things which you don't expect by switching from version to another, which suddenly happened. So it implied lots of work, even in low-level instruments we use for packaging. So per se, GNOME itself didn't need much work from us. I mean, we fix various things in terms of, as always we do, by adapting the code to work better in some architecture that, for example, most distributions don't use. While, for example, both in Ubuntu and Debian, we build, for example, for RISC-V, RISC-64, or S390X, which is a big endian and architecture which is not really used in the world by developers in terms of machines where you can run GNOME. But I find it's very useful as a testing environment, because it's, for some reasons, it's always right when there are failures. So it underlines memory errors which in many architectures aren't visible until you maybe don't use, for example, Backgrind or any debugging tools. You don't see any crashes, or if you're not random ones, while in this architecture are always happening. And this is nice to have such a architecture at the end, because you can fix actual errors. So we had various places where we had to handle this kind of things. And then, of course, all the UI side, which has been the fact that Ubuntu basically ships 3 main extensions, which are the indicators, the desktop, and the dock. As I said, the dock was basically the one who needed the most of the work, because of that code paths have been changed completely. While the indicators and the desktop didn't require huge changes. But we have also to say that in the desktop example, for example, we don't really do much work in terms of as Ubuntu developers, because the upstream is really, really responsive, and it basically is handling all the things for us. And we have to thank them for what the work they're doing.
Yeah, I think it looks great, and it's nice to learn that the doc takes more, like, it took more effort. So maybe it's too soon to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyways. What can users look forward to, or would they even notice a difference with like GNOME 41 and 42 coming down the pipeline, or is that going to be more like backend stuff, bug fix, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so far it's more like that. There are some stuff which is been brought around, like for example, there were some design decisions which I think have been delayed. Like for example, in the initial GNOME 40 vision, the doc or the dash, as it called in upstream code, shouldn't be there at all. But using, for example, the first line of the grid, the one you're now watching, to be used as the favorites line, and that change I think is postponed. I'm not sure it's actually at this point abandoned or avoided until we don't have like some better user testing in response to that. And I think in terms of, so far, I don't think we're going to change too much because it's more about, stabilize also they work for 40, but there are in the plans for further changes.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Like kind of cleaning things up, and thanks for showing us kind of what that looked like. And thank you for so much of your hard work there. You kind of mentioned a little bit about user testing, and one thing that I really want to highlight about GNOME 40 is it couldn't have happened without the community as well. Lots of user testing and a lot of efforts to kind of put a good quality product out there. And with that, I kind of want to pass the ball a little bit to Britt. Can you speak a little bit about the community, the GNOME community, and maybe some new user has just started using GNOME 40 and they're like, wow, this looks amazing. How can I get involved?
Certainly, yeah. So getting involved in GNOME. So the GNOME community is such a broad term. Everyone in this chat is a member of the GNOME community.
Oh,
equally.
I guess I should have said, like, you kind of led the engagement team for a while, like how you got in, like that's how you're related to GNOME.
That's how I'm related to. Yeah, I was on the board of directors of the foundation for a little bit. That was fun. I got to see the administrative side.
Right.
But yeah, the GNOME community, everyone here is a member of the GNOME community. Every Ubuntu user, every Ubuntu contributor is a GNOME contributor as well. I don't delineate between the two. I think it's better to be more inclusive and just include everyone. So whether or not you're testing Ubuntu nightly images, or you're testing Fedora, or our GNOME OS, which is what we call our own nightly images, you're testing GNOME, and that's fantastic. And all of that feedback comes back to our developers and is absolutely invaluable. Now with GNOME 40, it started with GNOME 36 and then 3.38. And then when GNOME 40 hit, we really hit our stride here. We wanted to make the testing process easier for not only end users, but also for extension developers and for a number of, and any other group, translators, doc developers. And the first thing that we did on our end is that we make all of our nightly builds of all of our GTK applications that make up the GNOME stack of applications available as Flatpak nightlies. And so that's something that's really cool that's never been able to be tested before, which is that you can test individual applications. Like, oh, I want to see what's happening on GNOME Calendar. I want to see what's happening on GNOME Control Center. I want to see, whatever it may be. You can just download a singular nightly to represent the entire brand new version of that app, and it will run stable inside the container that it lives within, which contains all of the nightly runtime. That was pretty fantastic, because it used to be, other than that, if you wanted to test GNOME Calendar, you'd have to spin up an entire unstable VM image of SUSE or Ubuntu or Fedora, whatever it may be. And that's a little bit too much to ask end users if the end users just wanting to test the calculator, for example. Right. So that's a really big one, was decoupling applications from the operating system.
Yeah.
And so that's huge. So now anyone can be a tester for whatever app they care about. And that has produced huge results. Now we're getting feedback months in advance that we would only usually get, post-release when it actually hit everyone's machines. Those little bugs that don't show up on the developer's machine, that only rear their heads when it hits 10 million users. So now we can catch those in advance, and so we're hoping that manifests itself as more stable applications. The next one was, okay, but there are parts of the operating system like shell and mutter that do require you can't just spin up a flat pack of GNOME shell. That's not possible. It's not an application. It's pretty integral to the OS. So for that, working with the folks at CodeThink in the UK, we've been able to create this GNOME OS nightly image, and that is an installable. It's built so it's not really a package-based OS. It's built so it's like an image-based OS using what's the technology behind it? I can't remember the technology.
OS tree.
Yeah, OS tree. It's built on OS tree, so that way you just can update the image just in big chunks, just all at once. But it is an entire GNOME unstable image that is testable leading up to the release. So the engagement team uses it. Hopefully you've seen all of our engagement team GNOME release videos that we've put out the last number of years. We've been using this nightly image to be able to capture the footage that we put into the image in nice 4K. But it's also usable by anyone who wants to download the latest GNOME shell mutter, see the changes, test it for itself. I know OMG Ubuntu and Phoronix, they use it readily to be able to test the latest changes, because it's spun out nightly and it's pulled directly from the Git source code. So everything's very fresh. So
We'll have to we'll send some URLs, or I'll put some URLs in maybe the discourse post that kind of can point people to the nightly images they can test to.
Yeah, so testing, that's like probably the number one way to contribute back, until you find that there's a project that you are passionate about. So being passionate about GNOME is amazing. Being passionate about Ubuntu is amazing. But to try to just tackle all of GNOME all at once is just too big of a bite to take. You need to focus your efforts on a specific process. Like, I want to be a translator for the calculator. I wanted to be a developer for calendar or the webcam application, cheese, whatever it may be. Once you find your focused effort, then you can really talk to the maintainers, figure out where a need is. Maybe the need is development, maybe the need is design, maybe the need is translation. So that's really the first thing to do, is to communicate, and that communication back and forth is pretty key. Now for communication, we have channels on Matrix. Matrix is a big one. We still have IRC on GimpNet, but we're trying to move everyone more over to Matrix, just because it is a much richer text environment to have conversations with threads and modern features. And so forming a community around there, joining the channel that represents the project that you're working on. Most of them have their own Matrix channel. It's really the best way to get involved and get started and get contributing if you want to actively pursue contributing. Though just reporting bugs is invaluable.
That's huge. Yeah.
Yeah. You should not feel less of yourself that all you're doing is reporting bugs. We can't fix bugs if we don't know the bugs exist, and that's where the bug reporters come in. And for that, everything we have is on GitLab. So it's all very well organized on GitLab, finding the project that you want.
Yeah.
And then lastly, for extension developers, because I know extension developers have felt for many releases that we put out these changes, it breaks their extensions. Why are we doing that? Why are we evil? Why do we hate extension developers? And we don't have any hatred. We actually enthusiastically love extension developers. They're a core part of what makes the GNOME community as diverse as it is. The problem is we also have to make plumbing changes to the shell, and we don't have any way to proactively, or we didn't have any way proactively to then try to communicate those changes with the developers ahead of time before their extension just ends up broken, come launch day. But what we've been doing is through GitLab continuous integration, we've been trying to make it so extension developers can actually can run their code against commit by commit every single change that comes in a GNOME shell code base That way they can have basically red flags pop up, weeks, months in advance that there's going to be a potential conflict, so they can get real-time feedback whether or not their application or their extension in this case is going to break or not, which doesn't necessarily solve the problem of GNOME shell developers breaking extensions, but it does solve the problem of communicating those breakages in a proactive way to the extension developers. So we hope that for the time being, that is a worthwhile improvement to the current state of things. And that's actually being led by Shri. Shri is spearheading that and has been spearheading that for quite a while. So that is
very cool. That's so exciting. And honestly, the thing about bugs, like when I was a new user, I wasn't passionate about any specific app, but I would find a problem and I would just assume that problem had already been reported somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
that was my nephew who popped in, so
very sweet.
He's very curious about the GNOME shell. So
future open source developer, I'm sure.
Yes.
I know, right? So my daughter too, I hope.
Yeah. And also just wanted to say that I know we've seen questions coming in, and Reese has been keeping track. And I think once kind of our chat winds down, we will be getting to your questions. We promise. We haven't forgotten about them.
Yeah, we're almost there. There's just like maybe one more question I want to ask real quick before we get to those questions, and that's for Monica. So I know there's, a lot of community reboot effort at Canonical. So what kind of major community events can we look forward to?
Well, we've got one that Reese and I, it's in the works, and we are really, really, really hoping to announce it soon. So fingers crossed, maybe at office hours next week. So Reese, feel free to pop in the little, StreamYard elf chat that we've got there. So, and we are really excited about that. And I know that one of the things that we have been talking about is, we're in this weird stage between like starting to get back to things and then pulling back. We do know that getting the Ubuntu community together it's a really important thing, and we've been so lucky to have these UbuCon groups. We've gotten to speak to them, and oh my gosh, on Podcast Ubuntu Portugal, they have been really involved, along with our other European Ubuntu groups in putting on the UbuCon Europes. We have the UbuCon Latin America group, which is very vibrant, and we also have UbuCon Asia, which if somebody can put a link to that, it's fantastic and entirely community grown effort. And so we do have these online events that are kind of bringing the community together, and whether having more of these in person when we're able to, oh my gosh, we want to have that happen so much. And of course they're going to be different from events in the past, but can they be just as awesome? We think so. And also and what's great is that we can help organize these, but also that the community can kind of get the initiative, get the ball rolling, and then come to us and be like, okay, we're putting this idea together. Can you help us? And so just seeing that creativity and the energy that the community has is so why, while we have kind of our super secret thing that will hopefully be announcing very soon. I know that going forward, especially, as things in 2022 hopefully get better, that to have more in-person things, it's something that I know that that everybody in the Ubuntu community wants. And also, going to, like, I've gone to 2 virtual GuadX and they've been great, but I think an in-person one is going to be even better. And it's been great to see like Ubuntu office hours at things like, and so seeing us kind of not only do our own things with our community, but realizing we are part of these bigger communities here and take part in those events, whether they're in person or whether they're still virtual. Like GuadX, y'all have let me host tea parties for the last two years, and I'm drinking tea now, and it's been wonderful. But also one thing I did want to give a shout out. I don't know if I can get a good angle on this thing, but literally the creativity for our community here. And Michael, who is in our YouTube chat, is a member of the Ubuntu Slovakia team. And I saw Marius Quebec wearing this shirt. And I'm like, and I'm a huge Eoin Erman fan, and I'm like, where did you get that shirt? And he's like, well, this was custom made by someone. And he's like, let me get you in contact with that community person. And so seeing that, and we want that kind of that creativity where you just go for it, because this is besides all those great things you can do like testing, oh my gosh, testing, so important, documentation, but also just getting the word out and getting that excitement about GNOME or Ubuntu out,
or
and
open source
if
in general.
and free and open source software. And if you're walking around and wearing a shirt and someone's like, oh, hey, I think I've used that once, tell me about it, it's a great way. So
great way to proselytize.
So exactly. So I know I kind of maybe got away from your original thing, but yes, but events, yes.
We have the community office hours
and community office hours, yes.
Yeah. And I think those alternate between times, right? So you can kind of, depending on what time zone you're in, and you want to attend the office hours, you might have to come this week or next week. And I was kind of thinking about maybe doing some sort of alternation with the Indaba too, to reach, a larger audience. So we'll kind of see about that, and I'll, ask. I'll probably put like a discourse post to find like a good time that would kind of work for the other side of the world. That's great. Well, thank you all so much for helping us like get this going. I'd like to, hit up some of those questions that Monica mentioned. So I have a lovely spreadsheet where the questions are being collected. And Monica, you had mentioned Ubuntu Portugal, so I'm going to jump to that real quick. And the question is, when will there be another testing week?
So testing weeks usually happen around the beta. The beta release date is at this point September 23rd. And so we will have blogs, we will have a discourse post. We are so lucky to have this super energetic testing team led by Yusuf Phillips is one of our main organizers of that effort. And so kind of keep your eye out about, probably we'll start doing announcements I would imagine would be coming in beginning of September, but look for that to start around happening middle to end of September.
Okay, very exciting. But you don't have to wait for that to start
You
testing.
don't. You've got the daily images. So.
And I will provide, here, let me make a note of that too. I'll provide a link to the daily Impish images too, just so you all have it. Yeah, that's awesome. So let's go to some GNOME 40 questions. Marco, I don't know if you know the answers to all these, but I know you're very familiar with the touchpad stuff. So will there be standard GNOME 40 touchpad gestures in 2110?
I mean, we definitely support the same gestures that are supported upstream. There's some work in order to improve some more gestures, in order to switch, for example, there've been work already to improve the workspace switch, but I think there's some work which is also being done by the guys for purists in order to improve some gestures which are more mobile friendly, which can of course adapt to the touchpad as well, which I've not been following much the code changes, but they're all coming. So there were coming. Plus, of course, all the ones we are supporting upstream already. So we basically don't do anything extra to what's already there.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, I look forward. I mean, my touchpad is broken, but I look forward to using it one day when I have a working touchpad. So some more GNOME 40 questions. Impish uses the same 40 approach at the start of the new session, like the activities button was just pressed. But is that the way? Is that the best way in Ubuntu? But is that the best way in Ubuntu having it adopted?
So I mean, that's something we can disable. So far, we didn't get particular like feedback on what's preferred by users. I think it's kind of things which opening, for example, a discourse, thread where we can discuss things, and depending on user approach to some specific features or specific settings, we can be toggled. It's all about taking a decision based on what we get out from users' feedback. It's one of those things which, personally, I find it's important for the first user. So maybe it can be tuned, and so in the way that you can that for the first, I don't know, like first logins could be a fixed number, could be just the first one. Even though the first one is also showing the setup, which is not probably the best case. But let's say the first normal session you start could be a way to teach users how to use GNOME, because the reason for that, and the reasons also I pushed personally on having something like that during the designing sprints we did with GNOME Stream. The last one was in Netherlands, was to teach some way to users how GNOME works, because I personally showed the initial GNOME screen to not tech savvy people in my circles in the past, and everybody's kind of shocked by an completely empty view. And in Ubuntu, the thing is a bit different, because of course we have the dock, which already triggers some well-known design, which of course might tell the users, okay, go there in order to open applications, for example, but doesn't explains you, for example, the sense of activities. So even though on the activity side there are some changes which probably are coming, like for example, switch it to a simple button instead of using the word activity, which might be misunderstood in some translations. It's all about teach out what GNOME can show to you, and so you see such a view, then you can maybe try to get there again, and so you learn how the things work. So I see the point of that.
Heather, I can't hear you.
We can't hear.
Sorry, I muted myself so I could type and not enter what was I saying? Yeah, so if users, find something that they don't like, or want to provide feedback maybe and suggest oh, maybe do it this way or that, please go open a discourse post. We're nice people and we like to read them, and we want to, if you have good suggestions, we want to absolutely include that, or at least have a conversation about, is it possible, or whatever, right? And there was another question that I think kind of is along the same line, but maybe Marco, the reasoning behind it. So Alexi asked, is there a special reason to place new opened apps in the dock in the opposite order from bottom to top instead of top to bottom? And obviously it comes from the original GNOME Shell's dash, where the apps were placed in order from right to left, but why?
Okay, in theory they should be shown top to bottom. If it's not, it's a bug.
Okay.
So
Very good. We got
it might be. It might be. I mean, as I said, there were lots of things which are still, for example, drag and drop doesn't work in some scenarios. There are still some things we need to tune in the dock, which are gonna be fixed before the final freeze on the. But it's now we are focusing on their stuff, still working on GNOME and their stuff. So personally, I have no time to address all these issues like in this moment, but they will be.
Yeah, but it's a good question. And like, if you notice something's like just kind of off, you could start a discourse post, and then it might end up being like, actually, this is a bug. Please go file a bug with this information.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
if the question is about showing the first icons are normally like the favorites, so that's the reason why are there as first. But the in this bottom side where the applications which are not favorites are showing, those should be populated by top to bottom. So if it's not, as I say,
I think it was about the dock though, not just like the list of applications, not just the grid.
Yeah, I'm saying like the listing of the icons in the dock. I'm saying.
Okay, great, thanks. But yeah, in the future, I mean, great questions, and feel free to not, have to wait until the next Indaba. You can just ask in a discourse post. We'd love to help out and improve. So let's lighten things up a bit. And Britt, I have a couple of questions for you that a lot of new users would have. So first of all, is it GNOME or is it GNOME?
Yes.
Oh, Lord.
Yes, it is.
I have garden gnomes outside.
So the answer is historically GNOME.
Okay.
Because that was the acronym, the GNU Network Oriented Object Model, that's what it stood for. I don't remember the whole acronym. The acronym stopped being an acronym, 15, 18 years ago. And now it's just what once was an acronym is now just a word, just a name. And the people that are involved say it both ways. So the answer is yes, you can say it either way, and either way is perfectly accurate. I've been involved in GNOME for a long time. I say no because I find it very uncomfortable to say GNOME, but other people say GNOME, and they're also equally accurate. So it's dealer's choice, and you're both right.
All right. Well, that's good. Nobody loses. Now, why the heck did we go from 3.38 to 40?
3.38 to 40. So it's not a very sexy answer. There's no controversy really involved there. The first off, it just felt time. We've been using 3.30, 3. Whatever for 10 years. And when people have this apprehension of what GNOME 4 was supposed to be, whenever you have some like really big, like a 10-year prefix that hasn't changed, and then when it finally comes time to roll it forward, what people's expectations are is that it's a reinvention of everything that GNOME has ever been. That we're going to rewrite the shell, the technologies are going to change, it's going to rewrite everything, which was never going to be the case. We just don't have the infrastructure and the resources to just up and rewrite hundreds of thousands of lines of code. So there's the Linux kernel way, which is that you can be Linus Torvalds and you can just call it Linux 4, Linux 5 for no reason, just because it felt good that day, but there are expectations that like when you up that suffix that something huge is coming, and we didn't want to keep leading people on. Like, you have no idea how many questions we got about GNOME 4 and when GNOME 4 was going to be released and what GNOME 4 was going to entail. So it just came time to kind of just drop the prefix, and we were on GNOME 3.38, and it was going to be called 3.40. And we just decided that the 3 dot stopped having any meaning 6 years ago. So it's just better just to continue on with GNOME 40. Now, coincidentally, it also happened to be the 40th release of GNOME. So it worked really well that like on the 40th release of GNOME, we'd release GNOME 3.40 to replace what would have been GNOME 40 to replace 3.40. And that's really it. And GNOME 40, to commemorate like that big momentous change in version number, we also got a bunch of visual overhauls. That was the big introduction of GTK4. There's just a whole lot of really fantastic technologies that kind of like led into it that commemorated such a change in our version number. But from here on out, the versioning scheme is a pretty simple one. GNOME 40 is what we have now. GNOME 41 will be the next one, and GNOME 42 will be the one after that. And we basically have adopted the Mozilla versioning system. We basically had the Mozilla versioning system, and then they changed, and then we have now adopted their new versioning system. So we're basically just keeping up with Mozilla here.
Oh, okay. So if Mozilla jumps off a bridge, I guess it will be.
It's the end of us.
So can people assume that with GNOME 40, everything is GTK4?
So things are mostly there. There's a number of apps that are still waiting to be ported. I think Cheese still has to go. Some apps that have less maintainer activity are still waiting to be going. But almost all of the core GNOME apps have been ported. There's even been some new apps that have been written. There's a new GNOME default, or what will potentially become the new default text editor for GNOME, written by Christian Hergert. And he's written that completely in GTK4, and it looks fantastic. It looks absolutely phenomenal.
What's that called?
I think it's just called GNOME Text Editor.
Okay.
Or Text Edit, Christian's an amazing coder. Naming things, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. GNOME Builder is pretty
GNOME
good.
Builder is pretty good. I don't know if he came up with that, though. I love Christian, though. He's a great guy.
Yeah. Totally.
But yeah, so we have a new text editor in the works, not necessarily to replace gedit. It's kind of uncertain what the relationship with gedit is. But yeah, there's lots of new applications coming. So far, the critical response to GTK4, at least internally, has been that it's a joy to work with, like far and away better than GTK3. We're just holding out on like Inkscape and GIMP to catch up. Come on, guys. You got it.
Is GIMP on GTK3 yet?
2. GTK2.
Okay.
And finally, GTK is the GIMP it used to be.
Just holding down the fort.
There you go, Heather. That's my answer for GNOME 40, why it is what it is.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Well, you kind of got jazzed about some apps there. So it kind of leads me into another question that somebody had. I forget who. Let's say the name. It was Brent asked, what's our favorite relatively unknown project that we're pretty jazzed about and that people should know about?
Oh, definitely. I'm going to go back to Christian's just like very basic text editor. Okay. It is so cool. I just love it. It's got like the little code window overview, so you can see like your little mini version of your code, like in the little scroll wheel. I don't even know what that's called, but I freaking love it. And Builder in general is just such a good IDE. Anyone who codes, like Builder is just so good. So
good for like cross compiling and like all kinds of debugging. And Christian's like super responsive if you have any questions, and super nice. Like
yeah. For those two apps, and just like smaller ones. I mean, like I guess like the unsung heroes, like the calculator app, just got completely rewritten effectively for what will be GNOME 41, and it just looks so cool. And these are small little things that make up the user experience, and nobody thinks about the calculator. You just use the calculator and then you close it and you never think about it again. But it's so nice that it got rewritten and it looks so good. And I use the calculator constantly in my day-to-day work. So for me, it's actually a huge boon to have a rewritten one. So
yeah, I use it a lot too.
Yeah, those are my 3.
Oh, okay. Monica, do you have a favorite?
Well, this is kind of it's maybe not quite as practical, but kind of fun. And I may be a little biased because the person who is making this is a fellow Ubuntu Mate user. But this was part of a DOS game jam. And it's a game, it's in alpha still because all of us in Ubuntu Mate land are getting caught up in game jams. But it is made for DOS. It runs on open DOS. So the game is almost entirely open source. And it's called Chronia. And so if you played, like me, a lot of Contra in your youth, kind of like those shooty games, this looks really cool. She has put the dev for this. Her name is Clarissa. She has put so much work, and she makes it so if you have like an old school compact, it will run on the original hardware. And I'm just like, and it's really great to see what people are doing development for open source games using Ubuntu for, as like their main desktop. And so I am probably going to suck at this game. These aren't my ideals, but never stopped me from enjoying it. And so would love to be able to kind of maybe do to play through or have a chat with her at some point. But this is it's been neat to see this process happening out in the open. And I love seeing that development process and seeing how people, they stream about it or blog about it or write about it. And you see it go from just idea to like project. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Marco, do you have a favorite cool new shiny app to talk about?
I don't know, I'm boring. I use all the same. Well, it's not really new. Like, for example, one thing I'm now using quite a lot, and I spend some time snapping it, is like Jopling, which is a to-do list handle, which is a nice UIs, and especially the
Jobling?
Jopling.
Jopling. Okay.
Yeah. It's like it's very nice because it works, you can synchronize your notes in your NAS or your server, and then you can handle that from your mobile phone, and from the desktop as an Electron app, but also a nice client CLI app, which is the one I snapped. So if you install Jopling, you can basically get a very nice terminal-friendly to-do list and notes management. It's quite there for lots of time, but I've been using recently more also because of that. And so, yeah.
Yeah, cool. I guess mine would have to be the same as it. Anybody that asks me what my favorite Linux app is, like the answer has been the same for the last 10 years. Cherry Tree is my favorite. It's like a OneNote kind of mind map application, and I snapped it when I first joined Canonical, thankfully, because it's based on Python 2.7, and so. But now there are some bugs that I plan to look into. And I've been trying to bring it up to it's been totally rewritten in C++ because of these Python 2.7 dependencies. There was just no way to go back. And there's currently some build issues with the MM stuff, like GTK source view MM and MM common, and all of these little things. There's a tiny little build issue with trying to get it up. So I'm kind of working on that, but that is I love that project so much. And I use that day to day to keep track of what I'm doing and to not forget things. And I've been using it daily for forever. It's part of my workflow, right? So yeah, I think those are our favorite. I guess not favorite. There are lots of favorites, but yeah, good question. Okay, what else do we have here?
I think the one on NVIDIA.
Yeah, I was just looking at that one. Marco, do you want to take this question? I can read it if you like. When Ubuntu 21.10 comes out, so that's in October, will NVIDIA work 100% on Wayland, including X-Wayland apps? This was asked by Christoph.
Yeah, I mean, X-Wayland apps are nothing else than apps running on X11, but the X server it's rendering Wayland. So yeah, everything which is gonna work on Wayland, basically we will work. So if it's the shell is based on Wayland, then everything's painting there has to be a Wayland client. And if it's an X11 application, we go through this compatibility mode, let's say, which will open a X server and show the window on there. But yeah.
Okay, good. I hesitate, like when someone asks 100%, it's like, hard to say absolute.
I don't know if it, for example, there are still the same bugs.
Yeah, okay.
For example, there are, especially mostly with scaling in terms of fractional scaling, which is something I've been doing the work for the initial support for that. And then we still have lots of things to polish and getting better. Mm-hmm. But I mean, what works in other graphic cards will work with NVIDIA drivers as well.
That's exciting. Yeah, I've totally put my NVIDIA system like off to the side. I'm just okay. Well, I mean, we're running out of time, but I kind of want to go back to the community aspect a little bit and hit up kind of one big question, and that is like, community has gotten us so far to just do everything. And so, where should, in your opinions, Monica, Britt, like as kind of community leaders, past, present, whatever, like what do you think the community should try and focus on, or maybe like what areas maybe don't get enough attention? And I'll throw it to you, Monica, first. Nope, you're muted.
Okay.
Yeah.
There we go. I think one of the things is, I know for the Ubuntu community, is giving us feedback and guidance and ideas on where we can make better processes to help them get started and contribute. I know that's been a big thing because our documentation, and especially I think for any project that's been around for any length of time, whether it's GNOME or Ubuntu or so many other projects, you just get this kind of documentation surplus. And it has been an issue. I know that this was an issue long before I started. And so I know one of the big things with our documentation is to clean our documentation up and make it more usable, because I remember when I just joined the community being very confused on where to go. And I think that one of the best things that the community can do right now is let us know where are the roadblocks for them when they try to get started. Where are they getting stuck? And so we can know, it's like, okay, this is where we need to put attention and effort, and then help us, create those ramps to get over those blocks or to knock those roadblocks down. And then also, I think a key thing, we talk about testing a lot for images or apps, but I think then testing those processes out. It's like, hey, are you a new user? Can you go through this tutorial or this how-to guide? Mm-hmm. And does this work? Does this make sense? Or do you get lost? Mm-hmm. And so I know that we've had a lot of kind of posts kind of asking for feedback. And so I think contributing to this post, and then when we start asking for volunteers to help with the, it's like, okay, based on this discussion, it seems like this is what people want to do. This is the help we can give. All right, let's come up with a solid plan to get this done. Mm-hmm. So I think that is one of the big things, is just helping us make this a more sustainable community and help it be easier for all you amazing people in the community to do what you need to do and get new people to join you.
Yeah, that's great. And Britt, do you have things that you think the community should focus on in just like 5 minutes?
Sure. So kind of, I think Monica hit the nail on the head with testing and helping and forming the stable infrastructure, so like a stable community. When you promote Linux to people, you should do it in a responsible way. If somebody is asking for a solution, like, oh, I want to play a game that only runs on Windows, and then you're like, oh yeah, just install Ubuntu, you'll be fine. Yeah, like, you want to make sure that you're recommending real practical solutions to their practical problems, because most people don't really think about operating systems on their day-to-day basis. They just think about the computer as a whole. So that's one thing, is making sure that, like, when you're promoting Linux and helping with Linux, that you're doing it responsibly, in ways that will help people, because otherwise you're going to give people bad impressions. We definitely don't want that. But beyond that, because not going to go down that path too far, I think the biggest thing for me is unity. It's that there's different communities. There's the Ubuntu community, Arch community, Fedora community. There's KDE, GNOME, all of these different communities. And so often people want to pin us against each other. And that's not how it is. We are all members of each other's communities. We're all brothers and sisters in the same fight together. Just because I am a GNOME Foundation member doesn't necessarily mean that my favorite application can't be a KDE app, which is Credit, by the way. I love Credit so much.
BSC is worth that for me.
Yeah. So it's like there's no war, there's no fight. It's just we're all in this together. And I would love the communities to all be in this together. And instead of there being these hard barriers where you think, like, I'm a Ubuntu user, so I can't even talk to people that run Fedora or something like that, it should be, why can't we all just be friends? Like, why can't we all help each other? Fedora
and learn from each other.
Yeah, we help each other.
Exactly.
So that would be my number one thing, is just more communication between communities, just helping each other out. There's so few of us in comparison to the monster, which is proprietary software. We need each other. We can't start partitioning each other off from one another. So that's my 2 cents. Is just talk more.
Just talk more. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Marco, do you have like an opinion on like what you think as a developer, like as a hardcore developer, where do you think the community should go to help out things?
Yeah, I mean, what Brie was saying, for example, I think it's competition is great, like in terms of improving things when it's and when you, of course, you have different views and you fight hard in order to get yours, maybe to succeed, but in a positive way. When you instead try to destroy the others, is always bad. So it's great to have different views, different ideas, because it's the beauty of open and free software, having plenty of ideas around and try to get yours and push for yours in order to improve the whole ecosystem. But at the end, I'd also been someone who can negotiate, for example, on the developer side, an API, a common view on how to get there, a common interface or something like that, which at the end, there's no point to fight for, and it will just bring benefits to the others. So I think that's the most important thing in our review. In terms of community of developers, I think it's a bit complicated, because the crowd of developers around free software are more like, okay, I see this cool project, I try to get my hands on, and then I can be just a random participation to the project and just, okay, fix this and go away. Or sometimes developers tend not to be too much into social things, especially online, I think. And so maybe they don't feel like part of something, and they just start to contribute because of their pleasure, and then they just leave and don't think of the whole picture. And that's something which is hard to like channel in a direction, I think. Because, for example, personally, I love to be part of, Guadec, FOSDEM events, where you feel that you are part of something. You realize definitely that you're not alone. You're in your room doing stuff, but you're part of something which is bigger, and you make friends with your friends, and actually have people around some line of code. And this is something not always the case, which is also sometimes the reason why there might be misunderstandings, because it's very and sometimes because things don't move on, because when you discuss things in real life and you're in front of a glass of something you prefer to drink, it's always easier to achieve a result. And of course this pandemic time didn't help on that, but
Right. Well, maybe when we all get back together in person, we'll all be a
Yeah,
little bit more
exactly.
friendly, right? Well, I think we're out of time, and I wanted to just take a moment and thank Monica and Marco and Britt for your time and for being here and for talking about these important, fun topics. And thank you, audience, for coming and watching and asking questions. And so I'd just like to promote, good behavior between everybody before you leave. Anyways, thanks for joining us at this Indaba number 4. The 5th one will be the last day, or sorry, not the last day, the last Friday of August, which is the 27th, August 27th.
And we'll be announcing our winner of the wallpaper competition.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm excited to hear what the new wallpapers are going to be for Impish. And also in August, we're going to have a special guest to talk about cups, because there's some new cups changes. So that'll be really exciting. So think of all your cups questions. And hope to see you in August. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend and see you next month.